Call the City Council work session to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilperson Iko Angeli?
Present.
Vining? Oh.
Oh, she's here.
Germany?
Here.
Here.
Felder?
Here.
Littman? Here. Mayor Clark?
Here. So we have a few items that are on our council work session meeting this evening. So I'm just going to go right to Mr. Pastu, or City Manager, if you could start us off, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. First item is the Downtown Development Authority informational meeting. In accordance with Act 57 of 2018, downtown development authorities are now required to provide 2 informational meetings each year. The DDA is required to notify taxing jurisdictions of the informational meeting, date, time, and location. And Annette Knoll, our Downtown Development Coordinator, will provide that presentation for council tonight.
Thank you. Good evening, Annette.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the council and the audience. Thank you for allowing me some time on your agenda this evening. Vince, you stole half my presentation. It's okay. Just wanted to reaffirm that, I'm sorry. You can't. All right. On.
Okay.
The green light is on. Is that better?
There.
Okay, I'm just going to have to bend over, I guess. So I am here this evening to present the Downtown Development Authority's annual report for the year in a way to for compliance with the new requirements of Act 57, which requires 2 informational meetings a year. So the approach that we will likely take is to do an annual report and prepare it in the fall of each year and present that to council as part of the requirements. And then the second informational meeting will likely be less formal, perhaps a coffee hour somewhere. But we are required to inform the taxing jurisdictions in a means to improve communication and transparency with those taxing entities from which we capture taxes. So before I start, I wanted to ask if there was anyone in the audience who is from one of those taxing jurisdictions. So it would be the city, of course, Monroe County, Lake Erie Transit, Monroe County Community College, or the library system. Is there anyone representing that?
Oh, I'm not representing.
You're not representing? Okay. I just want to report back to the state as well, if we're doing this as a way to improve communication, how many people were actually present, and Councilwoman Germani, I will make note that LET was present. So tonight I'm going to cover several topics, the DDA board and mission, the vision, which is basically the vision statement for the Downtown Development Authority, the strategic plan goals, the funding for the Downtown Development Authority, accomplishments for the prior year, public participation, our marketing and communications, and then some additional statistics for the Act 57 compliance. So currently, the DDA board is comprised of 9 members. Their names are listed in July of each year. There is an annual meeting, and the DDA board elects its officers for the year. So we do have a new chairperson, Tony Trujillo, who is the co-owner of Agua Dulce, and he is present this evening. The mission, I want to also make comment too, that we did say farewell to 2 board members this year, George Boyan, who was a resident representative on the board, and he relocated outside of the downtown, and also 2-term member, Scott Gucher, who served 8 years on the board. Both have since left this year. The mission of the board is to provide direction and resources to businesses, property owners, and residents in the downtown district. It works for the advancement of downtown through promotion of its businesses and events, the facilitation of redevelopment opportunities, and to increase Monroe's unique sense of place and community. Its goal is to be a dynamic and innovative organization that works with volunteers, other organizations, and the city of Monroe for the betterment of the downtown. The next part of the report is the vision statement. The vision statement was prepared in conjunction with a strategic planning process that was conducted 2 years ago. I will be reviewing that as well. But I wanted to take a note that this is not just a DDA vision of the downtown. This should be the community vision for the downtown. So it sets a path and course for, high level, high big picture, what we would like the downtown to be like. I would invite anyone who wants to read along with me to please do so as a way to reaffirm. But in 2027, downtown Monroe will be a state and nationally recognized vibrant and walkable downtown. The storefronts and upper floors are occupied and attract residents to shop and dine locally. It is the preferred downtown in the region for young and successful professionals and retired baby boomers to reside. The downtown Monroe retailers and restaurants combine into a lively shopping and entertainment district with active nightlife. They leverage technology to augment their storefront sales online and to promote their businesses to the community and to others in the region. All historic downtown buildings have made improvements from facade renovations, new signage, and outdoor seating. Empty lots and underused properties are revitalized with productive real estate, contributing to the tax base, creating jobs and places to live. The downtown is connected by an attractive, functional streetscape that is welcoming to pedestrians and non-motorized modes of transportation. The downtown has created greater connection to major employers, education institutes, and other attractions in the area, such as the River Raisin, national and state parks, and the Center for the Arts. So we move now to strategic planning goals. As I mentioned, the Monroe DDA adopted a 5-year strategic plan in 2017. The plan includes tactics to compel an economic and place-based focus to the DDA's work and to help the DDA prepare for implementation of the Downtown Master Plan. The DDA will accomplish its work in support of 6 overall goals, which were reviewed and amended and reaffirmed this last meeting that the board held in July. So the 6 goals are: preserve and enhance downtown by facilitating redevelopment, establish an environment that promotes residential growth downtown, market the downtown to encourage people to frequent local businesses and events, support downtown business owners with financial incentives, advocacy, and awareness, inform and educate building owners and the public of actions and accomplishments of the DDA and its businesses, and then lastly, serve as an intermediary for the organizations that connect to downtown and link to other community resources. I wanted to discuss for a few minutes a little bit about the prior year budget. The DDA operates on a fiscal basis, which is July 1st through June 30th, the same manner as the city. So these figures represent a to date as of expenses that have come in as of July 10th. There are some additional invoices that we're expecting, so these numbers will likely change a little bit. But this is as of a financial report that was issued on July the 10th. So the DDA is mostly funded through a process called tax increment financing, which means taxes are captured that are already paid, so it's not an additional millage, but it's taxes that are already paid by property owners and businesses that arise from growth in property values or investment since the DDA's base year in 1977. So again, we're only capturing taxes based on growth. About 85% of the DDA's operating revenue comes from that process. Other sources of funds include State of Michigan reimbursement. A few years ago, the State of Michigan made some changes to a personal property, which is taxes on equipment and furnishings and businesses. So it negatively impacted the communities. So the state is reimbursing lost revenue from that. So that's part of that. We also have some interest from funds that are in balance, and then some very small amount of miscellaneous revenue. Total revenue last year was $245,108, again, as of July the 10th. Expenses, half of the DDA's budget goes for debt. The debt is a bond issue that was used to pay for the riverfront parking improvements. Paid professional services accounted for about 23% of the budget. The reason is right now we're in a process of finishing up some planning processes and using some landscape architecture services and some regular architectural services. So that accounts for why professional services accounts for that much of the budget. 18% of the budget is staff, and 10% of the budget is other. Total expenses as of July the 10th was $229,627. Each year, the DDA engages in a planning process, so we're about to enter that process for next year. So I'm hoping that as we get these meetings, informational sessions, more on a cycle, in the fall, we'll be able to talk about what we did, and in the spring, we'll be able to talk about what we will do. So moving right along, accomplishments from 2018, 2019. Completed the downtown master plan and corresponding public information campaign, created and implemented annual marketing and communications plans, amended and renamed the downtown reinvestment program, broadening eligible expenses. This was formerly known as the facade improvement program. Completed phase 1 of upper floor conversion technical services at 2 properties, 113 East Front and 12 and 14 West Front. Also, initiated a project to create new streetscape design guidelines or standards, completed a Riverwalk enhancement and expansion conceptual plan, installed spring and fall seasonal decorations in the downtown planners, underwrote the cost of phased effort for tree maintenance. You'll notice that about 1/3 of the trees in the downtown, the canopies were raised, and the branches were cleaned up, moved away from storefronts. That was underwritten by the DDA. And then lastly, hosted stakeholder meetings with business and property owners. A little talk about public participation. We are trying to compel or create an environment where more citizens and property owners and businesses feel, even if they're not on the board, that they can serve in some capacity. So I'll use this as my 2-second commercial. If you'd like to volunteer for downtown, please see me. We have committees forming for next year's work, and always need additional input and ideas. So I want to feature a couple of the committees that had something to do with some of the things that we did last year. One was the Riverwalk Enhancement and Expansion Team. The members were Anthony Trujillo, Asia Hawthorne, Darlene Belair, Loretta LaPointe, Lucy Fortin, and board member Mackenzie Swanson was the lead on that. The photograph you'll see is a picture of them doing a walking tour of the Riverwalk. And then the second committee, all right. There we go. The second committee we wanted to feature was the Streetscape Design Standards Committee. This group has been working for about the last year to create a strategy for the look and feel of the public spaces in the downtown. The members were Janet Burns, Jim Jacobs, Les Lukash from the board, who was the lead, Patrick Lewis, Ryan Hauser, and Stephen Mahalik. So thank you very much for the contributions from the volunteers. Only a couple more slides, please bear with me. So we want to talk a little bit about the communications and the marketing that have been pursued. So the first slide is about social media and web. The DDA has a page on Facebook, Downtown Monroe. We currently have 5,500 followers. Posts with photographs, our average reach is about 2,400 persons. Posts without regular posts average about 1,100. So that's 1,100 people viewing each of the posts on the page. On Facebook, the followers, 76% are women, and 25% are between the ages of 35 and 44. 2,500 of them are Monroe area residents, so 3,000 people feel a connection to the downtown and don't live here. So that's a good stat to know. We recently subscribed to Google Analytics for the website, so unfortunately, I don't really have any stats that we can show progress on for the past year, but within the first month, we had over 200 people become active users on checking out the website for downtown Monroe. Of those 218, 54% were male, and 33% of those were between the ages of 25 and 34. So that's a way for us to perhaps reach a little bit younger of a demographic. There is also a page on LinkedIn. We view that more for professional reasons, trying to connect with the development community and the real estate community. We have 12 followers on our LinkedIn page. So if you are on LinkedIn, please connect with the Monroe Downtown Development Authority. So there was also a marketing plan that was put together last year, along with a communications plan. As a result of those plans, we released we issued 9 press releases. We do have monthly e-newsletters now. There's one called Downtown Monroe Matters. That is a subscriber-based e-newsletter that you can subscribe to if you visit the homepage of the downtownmonroemi.com. Periodically, when we do send those out, you're able to forward those on and invite others to engage as well. There's also an e-newsletter called In the District that we send specifically to business and property owners to inform them of opportunities for them to engage in the work of the DDA. This last year, a calendar module was added to the website, so any event or happening that is in the downtown district, we include that now on that module. We replaced a very complicated business locator map with a rat card, which directs people to the website to be able to find more information. There was also a full-page ad, a directory ad in the Christmas Magic in Monroe program that listed all of the retailers, restaurants, and service businesses that might appeal to a gift buyer for the holidays. So that went over very, very well. There's also a cooperative radio campaign that was done and a new business recruitment brochure. You see the thumbnail of it entitled Opportunity Rising. So that is available online now, and it lists important incentives, programs, and statistics that might be relevant to new businesses wanting to move into the community. So some of the more technical requirements in order to comply with Act 57. Again, the intention is to kind of produce this report a little bit later in the year once some of the data is more finalized and we are able to track statistics a little bit more. But the information that the state of Michigan is asking for is a year formed, which is 1977. The last amendment to the plan, which is the DDA's tax increment financing and development plans, which was in 2006. The current expiration date of tax increment financing plan is December 2037 tax capture. So that would be June of 2037's date. The base year value was $15,836,210. The captured value, which again is the growth beyond that base year, was $8,326,850. The fund balance, again a preliminary number, which is the money that has not been expended by the DDA from the previous several years, is $501,271.33. Obligated but unexpended, $20,000 for facade improvements from last year's facade incentive program. Current contracts, we are under contract with Mitchell and Moet Architects for $10,000 for the second phase of our upper floor conversion technical services. We are under contract with Russell Design, which is a landscape architecture firm. $35,000 for production of the downtown, the streetscape design standards, and $44,300 for the Riverwalk enhancement and expansion project. I did want to make note that the city of Monroe contributed $20,000 to that project, so the net to the DDA was $24,300. Bond indebtedness as of June 30th, 2019. The principal is $1,640,000. Interest owed, $432,341. The last payment of the bond is scheduled for May of 2032. So we have just a little over a decade left of payments on that bond. So in closing, we have some information, contact information, if anyone has any questions. And I'm certainly able to answer them now, but please feel free to follow up with me at any time.
Thanks, and I think, Andrew, you have a question?
The base year amount, was that nominal or real?
Pardon me?
Was it nominal or real dollars, the base year amount, 15 million point eight?
Those are real dollars. So when a DDA is created, there is this defined district, and any property that's in it has a value at that date. So on that date in 1977, totaled up, that's what the value was.
Inflation adjusted to now.
No.
So they're nominal dollars.
Yes,
Okay. So unless it's going to be $16 million next year, they're nominal.
they're nominal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
John?
I think maybe to address Andrew's question, the base year does not change. Okay, so the base year is the same
Throughout the entire.
TIF until it expires in 2037. So that the base doesn't even change based on inflation. It stays at the amount,
Yeah,
and that's what the tax increment is based on. What's the taxable value now? Probably double that amount.
No, it's that plus 8 million, so 20.
20,
Okay, I don't have a calculator.
23,
with me.
24
A little bit
million.
over 23.
Dollar increase. And what I guess the point I was getting to is a good portion of that $8 million would be inflation.
Could be, yeah. I mean, it also could be, I think a big portion of it too was the addition of the new Monroe Bank and Trust headquarters downtown.
Right, yeah.
And you're kind of getting the crux of what I'm getting at is what amount of that is natural growth and what amount of that is actual return on investment. So
Yeah.
you're very much getting to what I was after.
Yeah, we'd have to do a line-by-line look at the properties that are within the district to determine if it's new investment or appreciation only.
Okay.
Other questions from council?
I don't have any questions. Thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you.
So I did make a couple copies. We are trying to go paper-free as much as possible. So there are a few copies of the annual report if anyone would like one. We are making some changes to the website in the next couple months. So part of the requirements for Act 57 is that we start uploading a lot more information. So when the pages are ready to receive the reports, then we'll be putting all of this information online as well. So, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Next item on the work session agenda is to talk a little bit about refuse management. We've got a couple of issues that I'm going to talk about tonight. We've got more than that, but there's just two that we want to discuss. One relates to, I think the way the order of the presentation is, as Mr. Lewis and I have been working on a issue with account for waste management for the number of units collected. A couple of things came to certainly my attention where I kind of recognized it, but it really hit home, is the number of single-family homes that have multi-tenants. And the other part of it is, and since the 1st of July, I've encountered 4 different situations where there's been a pile of refuse out to the sidewalk or out to the curb, predominantly from landlord evictions and what have you. Now, one of the benefits of our contract that was adopted not quite 2 years ago with Waste Management was that we have unlimited pickup. But it has become a problem because I had 4 separate incidents and since the 1st of July, and that doesn't count how many Mr. Lewis and his office resolved. But it seems to be an increasing problem. I don't know if we got the photos to go through. Oh, I'm sorry.
You want me driving or?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
It's gonna be the presentation. If you can open the PowerPoint, that's fine. That's why I gave you both. Because
Yeah.
it's 84 megs. I wasn't sure very well. I didn't know, Vince, if you wanted to do most of the discussion.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't mind it.
All right.
So but part of it is driving a bigger problem that we seem to be dealing with on a regular basis with that, so.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. This is just a small example of, in the downtown area. But as the bullet says, unlimited pickup. In the past, we had a limit on the contract as to what it was. And so,
I wanted to mention too, Mr. Pastor, that was, we put some photos on here, uploaded some photos to give you an example of what proper bagging would look like. So this was a photo of what it looks like in the downtown where we've got it properly bagged, just to show you, because we're leading to something on the downtown side of things too. So I'm sorry, Vincent.
That's all right. Go ahead.
Cut you off there.
go on.
So, do you want me to
Yeah.
narrate a couple of bullets? Okay. So basically, we're on the second year of our new contract. The old contract used to be a 3-container limit, and that was 32 gallons or 50 pounds. It couldn't exceed either one of those. The new contract does go to the unlimited pickup, and as I put on there in italics there on the third bullet, the city reserves the right to limit or deny service when it determines that material for disposal was generated off premises. And that's one of the concerns we're starting to have about some of these pickup points, is whether that refuse is truly generated on premises or not. Unlimited still has to be bundled, placed properly. We've gone up to 35 gallons and 60 pounds, but it still has to be bagged and placed correctly. So that's why we gave you an example on this photo there. The intention of the contract was unlimited for normal daily operations, not every week we're going to pick up anything you might want to put out. So there's got to be a practical upper limit. Some of the issues we're having, you want me to just continue on, Vince? Yeah. Okay.
I'll pipe in.
Some of the issues we're having, and I've sort of, as you'll see in the photos, we're sort of cascading up here to something that's starting to get out of hand here. That's an example of what I'd call kind of a marginally compliant. They've got a container, it's overflowing. We've got a few loose articles, nothing too bad, but that's starting to push the limits. What we're having is more of the challenges. We thought going to unlimited would eliminate some of the concerns with people who had 4 and 5 bags. What we're seeing now is people pushing the limits. We're starting to see more large disposal piles more regularly associated with rentals. Not all. There are single-family owner-occupied that are also exceeding the guidelines here. It seems like the larger the pile, the messier the refuse looks as far as the bagging. As I mentioned, not exclusively rental properties. We've seen a lot of people purging their garages and sort of spring cleaning, but all year round. Again, marginal set out there. Got a couple of locations here to show you some recent ones. I had tried not to listen to any identifying information, but this was an example of we had a rental property that looks like an eviction. We had a number of, you can see we've got some in bags, we've got some sort of strewn every which way. This is a problem when the owner calls and says, well, you have unlimited pickup, I want that picked up. And I think as you can see, this is not our intention, but this is one of the examples that we had that Mr. Pastu spoke about. There was a second example. This was in the downtown area. This also appeared to be an eviction. Again, we've got bags, we've got piles, we've got some bulk items, but when they're buried under a pile like this, it's hazardous for the waste management people to collect those. So these are some of the issues we're having. You see refuse in a recycling container. So obviously that's not following the guidelines there. So this is what sort of passes as some folks are trying to pass off as unlimited collection. This was an example of an owner-occupied property. This was a garage purge. So it is being used by residents for things like that, which is to some degree what we were hoping for. We wanted to try to give our residents a better vehicle to head off potentially blighted conditions, because if they have a good way to get rid of their unwanted refuse, it keeps it from being on porches and in yards and things like that. So there is some benefit to that. But again, we've got challenges with conveying the messages about how it needs to be bagged and not just thrown to the curb. We also have, in the second part of the discussion here is about downtown. And I put the first photo on the first slide for a reason there, and that was, and as well as these couple. These are locations where the containers were set out properly. They're all in bags, they're in tight, neat piles. The challenge we get into with the downtown area is the density. And you have these all over the place on Wednesday night and Thursday until garbage collection. And I don't think, in keeping with Ms. Knowles' presentation, this is not really the image we want to convey for our downtown area. That first thing you come to downtown Monroe with, at least one day a week is you see garbage bags all over the place. So regardless of how tight they are with the guidelines. Some of the larger units, larger generators like restaurants have over the years been required to have their own dumpsters. You can't have this kind of food waste sitting out. And those are typically placed in city alleys and in some parking lots. Waste management also has to pick up, and I don't have a picture of one, but the metal trash cans that we have downtown, that's in their contract to pick those up on Thursday. But those often get full. We get people that put their household refuse in there. They'll take a bag and stuff it in. They're really intended for people that are buying an ice cream cone and want to throw the wrapper away. That's what those are there for, not for dumping your household trash. But with the single day a week pickup, we do sometimes get the property, the residents upstairs may take a bag downstairs and stuff it in the trash can. Again, we're getting kind of to the level where there's a couple more. These are some of the set out challenges where these piles aren't really keeping within the guidelines, and they push the limits on these. But so one of the challenges we get is who's responsible for putting the unbagged stuff out there. When you have multiple potential tenants that could occupy that collection point, who is the one that didn't follow the guidelines? We do also. One thing, so what we've talked about is considering a pilot project to replace curbside collection with common dumpsters collected multiple times per week. And that's an idea we're floating. City manager had met with actually the DDA board chairman fairly recently to talk about that possibility to eliminate the unsightliness. We currently manage a separate contract with Republic and Allied, which is one company merged, for weekly collection at other city facilities. So like City Hall dumpster is collected through a city contract that's also paid through the refuse millage, but that's for standalone city facilities. So what we thought is we could look at, for starters in the pilot program, using those dumpster enclosures in the west front South Monroe Street parking lot, because those were set aside for those businesses to potentially use, and they're being underutilized. So I've got a picture of what we had talked about being a potential pilot area. And once we sort of draw up that for council approval, if you're wish to consider that, is we would then cease curbside collection in that area and instruct the residents and the business owners to use those dumpsters. And we would arrange for probably multiple pickups, probably like Monday and Friday, see how it went, to see how many times we need to pick those up. And if it was successful and it seemed to be something we wanted to consider further, the more complicated areas of downtown are certainly those that don't have the parking lot capacity, don't have as many alleys. We need to work our way through those. But that was something that we was tossed around, and we wanted to bring that in front of you to sort of discuss that tonight. Next steps, and Mr. Pasty will want to probably talk a little bit more about the discussion of the multifamily residential units and what we want to do there.
If I might, just I'll skip to 2 and 3. Is that certainly, as Mr. Lewis indicated, looking at the downtown dumpster pilot project, we think it's a good start, particularly in that area where there's a couple of them located. One of the things that Chapter 610, Section 7 of our ordinance gives the manager some latitude for developing regulations. And one of the things, if you can flip back to the last slide, what I would envision is having us meet with the property owners there, providing some discussion, feedback with them, but ultimately to provide some regulation related to where they're going to be disposing of their refuse. And then, as Mr. Lewis indicated, we would monitor the need and frequency of the pulls from those dumpsters so that we can get it off the curb. But after the meeting, I would likely draft the regulations as to where these property owners will do the disposal, and certainly bring it back to City Council for ratification so that we're all on the same page, and maybe some input from the DDA board. The other part of it is as Mr. Lewis indicated, is it's almost a block by block approach as to how we would expand the use of dumpsters throughout the downtown, which is not in most places uncommon. Frankly, our practice of putting it out to the curb is very unusual for most downtowns, and certainly something that we need to consider in changing, so. And then the last one, that covers the downtown area. The other is, as I put in my fact sheet, is to consider an assessment for multifamily residential units. In a lot of cases, I mean, there's been conversation about trying to turn some of our neighborhoods back into neighborhoods, but you have some some rental units where we'll see as many as 6 in one of them. I think when we counted the number of meters, and literally they can put out a lot of waste, and so it's in a residential area, functioning as a commercial business, and in many cases the commercial businesses are responsible for their own refuse collection and disposal. And so what I'm proposing for council to consider is providing, if they're in a residential district, the first one is like any other single-family residential, but after that, assess them at 50% of what we're charging for waste management, or what they're charging us for collection. And in some ways, I think it would be far more equitable for them to be doing that and treating it as a business. And the other part of it is you don't get the benefit of unlimited pickup, because you can see from an example I think the abuse is starting to take place. And if you are a business and you're cleaning out your offices or whatever, or your retail business, you have to make arrangements with the contractor. So I'm throwing that out for council for feedback and consideration, and certainly I think it's fair and equitable, and certainly addresses some of the problems we've been experiencing.
See if there's comments from council. John?
I'll start it out. Can you cycle back to a couple of those residents that kind of exceeded their the rental properties right
Sure.
there?
I'll start at the top
Now,
there.
my opinion is this. That's blight. That's not waste. That's blight. So my concern is, why aren't those people getting a blight citation?
They are. That was actually, it was the counter argument we get when we slap a blight citation is, well, it says you have unlimited refuse. I want my refuse picked up.
Not like that.
No. And we tend to fight that battle very vociferously.
No, I look at it from if I was the waste hauler and I was the gentleman that's putting that in the back, how do I know what's in some of that material? And it's unfair to them to have to pick that kind of stuff up. I mean, there are things called contractor bags that you can stuff a lot of stuff in.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing is, I'm going to take more of an aggressive approach. Rental property is income property. Rental property is commercial property. I agree with the manager. If somebody's got a 2 or 3 unit apartment, the first one is part of their taxes. The second and third ones, in my opinion, shouldn't be at 50%, should be at 100%. They should pay per unit what the going cost is for a single family. That's a business, they can expense that, and they can write it off. Because there's a lot of single-family homes in this town that have been illegally over the years turned into 2 and 3 units. And it's not fair for the neighborhood to have to put up with that on a weekly basis. So I think, my opinion is, if somebody's gonna turn property into rental, income, commercial property, they should pay what a taxpayer pays on a per annual basis for that. But the other concern on the downtown is the collective dumpsters are a good idea to start out with, but they can become a maintenance issue. And also during the summer, they can be very, very smelly, especially if they're located very close to restaurants. We've got a couple of existing restaurants in that area that you're suggesting, and you got one that is a proposed restaurant. Question I have for the manager, wouldn't it be, an alternative would be to create a principal shopping district for the downtown, and then maybe contract with a hauler like Stevens or Republic to do an evening pickup, so everybody has to have their garbage out by 5 at night, and then a waste hauler comes through at 9 at night when a lot of the cars aren't on the street. They pick everything up, so it's never done during the day. And
Into
then,
a dumpster.
no, into a garbage truck. We have a PSD, Principal Shopping District. They all pay an assessment. They all put their garbage out like they're doing now by 5 o'clock at night. By 9 p.m., we have a contractor come through and pick all the garbage up so it's never seen during the day. And the property owners are paying an assessment for that.
If I may.
Go ahead, Your Honor.
Andrew?
Doesn't that seem like the downtown property owners are then paying for refuse pickup twice?
They don't pay it now.
They don't pay on their current buildings?
Some of
It's
the
only-
downtown property owners contract with their own haulers. Don't they?
Some of them do,
Some of them do.
yeah. The ones with the large usage are restaurants.
Okay.
Well, and that stems too from the fact that we always used to have the 3-container limit, and obviously the restaurants were nowhere close to that. They couldn't be.
Well,
So they, right off the bat, had to have their own dumpsters.
and I think where you're going, Councilman, with a PSD, you can set the methodology up any way you want. So if you have a business that's a sole proprietor and they're paying it as part of their taxes, they don't have to pay the assessment. But somebody that's got a business and has 2 or 3 apartments, then they would pay, they pay an additional assessment for the additional waste.
As long as it's marginal above and beyond whatever.
Marginal above and beyond, yeah, yeah.
That was the main concern. When he clarified that, that's much
Yeah,
better. Because I agree that everybody does, in their taxes, does pay for refuse
Yeah.
in some manner, fashion, or form. So they should get some kind of collection, or at
Yes.
least a discount towards the next part of the
Correct.
collection.
agreed.
Andrew?
Question for Mr. Lewis regarding the residential refuse. Would it help at all, our waste hauler, if we had the residents say, hey, I plan on emptying my garage, I plan on doing it this date. You know, do you want to send out a separate truck just to do those properties? Or at least I'm giving you a heads up and letting you know it's going to be an issue, and not just, oh, I wake up, on trash day and the guy gets to my house and he's like, oh, for crying out loud, I don't even know if I have room for this.
The answer to that is yes, and it certainly would help, because that's where we get into the, we're somewhat sympathetic to the waste hauler, because, I mean, when you get to a point where your one residence impacts your ability to deliver service to the rest of the route that day, that's too much. And we always tell the residents, yes, it's unlimited, but there's a practical upper limit to that. When you start impacting your neighbors, then that's the practical upper limit. It would help to some degree if they knew that in advance. Some people do call. I mean, occasionally, like some more of the conscientious ones say, hey, do I need to make any special arrangements? And if we get that phone call, we will pass that along to the supervisor. And oftentimes what he'll say is, we'll pick some of it up today, we'll pick some of it up tomorrow, and there can be that communication. It starts to break down if you have hundreds of people doing that every week. It becomes challenging to manage that chaos to some degree, I guess. And we sort of managed that in the past with the bag tags, where you had to pay, it was roughly $1.50 for each additional bag you had. And a lot of people, once they got to the $50 or $100 margin, they just said, I'll just arrange to get a private dumpster. So it's sort of managed itself in the past, just because the checks and balances of what their additional costs were. Now that there's no additional costs, people are less likely to want to do that. We could tell them that's the only way it's going to get picked up, but then we would have to set some kind of limit. We'd be saying above 6 bags or 10 bags or whatever it is you have to call. So it could help. It would probably shift some of the discussion, some of the argument elsewhere. It's not a bad idea, but I don't know to be the end all be all answer.
Case here, though, that Mr. Lewis had as examples, there was only one that involved an actual property owner that was emptying out. The rest of them are pretty much tenant. And going to the point of blight, we have this argument, well, it's unlimited pickup. If you establish the regulations that if you're a landlord and you put that out to the curb like that, it is blight, and there is no ambiguity whatsoever. And I think that's in part what we're looking to accomplish through the regulations, is to eliminate any of that ambiguity, and then we just turn it over and
John?
Has Waste Management ever refused to pick stuff up like that?
Yes, they refused to pick this one up.
I would too.
I
that's
backed it
terrible.
100%. There have been times when it's been kind of marginal, where we try not to ask them to do us too many favors, but again, we'll say if there's only 1 or 2 things that are kind of marginal, they usually will pick it up. But I typically get a phone call when something like this is set out.
Your Honor.
Right?
If anybody remembers past history where we used to have fall and spring cleanup, or one or the other, I remember seeing yards just filled with trash to the gills. So I'm not so certain that would pan out so well, because I think people may abuse that as well.
And it's part of the challenge is, I think waste management, where people have bagged up 35 or 40 bags of trash, they have picked it up. I've seen them, and then we don't get a phone call and it just goes away typically. But where we get into trouble is when the property owner here says, well, I bagged up most of the stuff, why don't they take the bags? And part of it is that safety. I can't expect the employees of waste management to go out there digging through the pile, not knowing what's in the pile. It's got to be clearly visible to where those employees can be safe knowing if I pick up this bag, I'm not going to get a needle, I'm not going to get a splinter, I'm not going to get a bunch of nails. And so that's some of the challenge is just simply preparation.
So tonight, I'm sorry.
Kelly?
So Patrick, we went to unlimited pickup. Are you stating that we're gonna put a number, an actual number on what unlimited means? So that the residents understand? Or are you saying that you just don't like the way it's strewn throughout the front of the house? So, I mean, either we're gonna have unlimited pickup or we're not.
I know.
We're paying for unlimited pickup. So, of course, we lost the whatever revenue or order that the tags, that you say that the tags helped
we're-
with.
If I may, just what we're proposing is still for single-family residential, owner-occupied, the unlimited applies. It really does. It's the problem that we are finding more and more of is where you have landlords that are throwing out emptying tenants' belongings out onto the curb and forming blight. So if you're a single-family owner, unlimited still exists. And we could provide the list of which multifamily residentials would no longer be eligible for that unlimited pickup. And if they don't pick it up, then obviously we issue the blight citation and it'll take it resolved that way, but also with a significant bill to the property owner.
So that's how I feel like the blight should be passed on to the property owner, who can then pass it on to their tenants. Also, I wanted to point out at some point we talked about with our housing shortage that Monroe we could use some multi-family dwellings. Are we going to deal with the potential developers or property owners up front that if you have these multi-units, we're gonna add that in so that they know that up front?
And typically, our zoning ordinance would require that as part of the, like, take, for example, a redevelopment site that's going to have 30 townhomes. Part of the site plan approval contained in our zoning ordinance would require space for a dumpster and enclosure and everything like that. Because there's a fine line, and the city manager and I got quite an education. We drove around, we probably spent 10 to 12 hours looking at some of the disputed units. And there is a difference. You can get some small, like 6-unit apartment buildings that look like your traditional apartment buildings, and then you can have large houses with 6 units in them. Historically, those things that look like traditional apartment buildings have always had their own dumpster and continue to have their own dumpster. What we're talking about is this slide of the larger single-family homes into multifamily carved-up units that tend to have more move-in, move-outs, that have more stuff. That seems to be the issue here. The bona fide commercial building would normally be required to have its own dumpster right from the get-go.
Okay, and then one more question, Your Honor, if I may. With the, John mentioned he mentioned illegal multi-unit dwellings. What is the city doing about that? Do we know about these illegal multi-unit dwellings?
Yeah, Mr. Lewis and I, driving by, verifying what we had on our housing rental list, came across, well, gee, there's 3 meters there, or there's 3 mailboxes, and they're not on the housing rental list, and we have that, and we're going to be turning those over to the building department. So there's a number. It was pretty enlightening.
So are these the tenants putting this refuge out like this, or is it the landlords? Because if it's a landlord, being a landlord, I would not put it out like that. I would bring it out in droves, in an organized manner. You don't have to put it all at once. So is it the tenant?
It's
or the
generally
landlord?
most, I don't want to say most, because I don't want to say all, or I don't even want to say 50%, because we don't always know. But it seems to be more driven by evictions and move-outs. And so it usually ends up where it's the landlord that's kicking somebody out, and then they have a house with just all sorts of stuff left behind. And before, when we only had a 3-container limit, it was the landlords would typically say, we know we have to arrange for a dumpster. I mean, there's certain legal requirements that complicate things because they have to have the stuff out and available for the tenant to claim for a certain length of time. So that always adds to the challenge there, that you have to have it out there for like 24 hours, I think, before you can dispose of it. But that it does seem like it's more driven by the evictions than anything else, but a lot fewer of the landlord property owners seem to be availing themselves of a dumpster and making the problem go away as they should. They're just saying, well, there's nothing I can do. The tenant moved out. I had to leave their stuff out, so that's what I did.
So are we finding these landlords?
We are, if we have to
Blight?
collect it. We typically will. Usually, what happens is we'll tag it for blight, and then we'll get a phone call asking why the garbage men didn't pick it up, and then we explain why that's not going to happen. And then there's the threat that if it's not picked up by a certain date, public services staff will clean it up, and then that's billed at our forced labor rates. And per the finance director, we're doing that on time and a half because we're not going to set aside our normal daily duties to deal with ordinance violators. So we'll do it on after hours, time and a half at our full overhead rate, and that can get very expensive if you're, several $100s for a pile like this, because our guys and gals have to go pick that up after hours.
And there are people that can leave huge messes in homes, but you don't have to put it out like this. You can put it out, there are other ways to handle it.
That's correct. Yep.
Thank you.
Vince, you put this on there for discussion. I know we have a couple more items on the work session. I'll just make a final comment. I think when you look at it and it's a business, then you should be acting in that fashion. And if it's not a residential and there's multiple apartments and the landlord's not tending to it and doing these things, they should be billed for it. There's ways they can process through that, whether it be through a rate or better pickup or organization. And some that we've talked to have actually accommodated that in fashion of recognizing why it's not going to work. Because it doesn't matter the day of the week, you just put it out there and then the trash collection on normal days and for 4 days, that's just not acceptable. So,
Yeah.
John?
Your Honor, one last comment for the manager. Since we're talking waste management, I know a few months back there was some discussion about trying to resolve waste pickup over at the townhouses on Front Street. Is that still being reviewed?
It's still in consideration with the interest of resolving our first issue with the count. And then we'll come back around, circle around, I think, afterwards, so.
Okay. Don't want to, okay, I didn't want to lose track of that. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thanks all. Pat, or Mr. Pastu, a couple more items.
Yep, next item, if we could pull up the roof replacement and chiller removal at the former multi-sports complex, now the National Park Education Center. Just a few, as they're in the process, working with the collaborative, that would be the National Park, and also with the Battlefield Foundation. They're approaching finishing up the final design for improvements there. The one issue that was kind of hanging out there is the roof itself. Under the lease agreement, the city is responsible, or I should say the building authority is still the owner of it. It has the responsibility for the capital maintenance items such as the roof, the building structure, parking lot. And if you slide through a few of those, you can see that the condition of the roof, there's a lot of exposures. They have plenty of leaking. And to be honest with you, as they're going through finalizing the design, ready to go out to bid, our thought was, we just need to replace the roof, remove the chiller unit up there on the top that served both of the arenas in the past right there. And that way, incorporate it into the contract for the work there, in part because if they remove it and replace the roof, now the warranty is under one entity as opposed to having the building authority handle that as a separate item. And if something goes wrong, then you're pointing fingers at each other. And so our thought is, let's make this part of the project. The estimated cost for all of this net was probably somewhere in excess of $200,000. The building authority does have some reserves that would be able to do that. And I bring it to the council's attention because unlike the DDA or the Brownfield Authority, where you approve it, the Building Authority, you make the appointments, but don't approve necessarily the budget. But the fact that ultimately, once the last bond payment is made in 2023, it does revert back to the city. So we thought we should probably give you some notice that we're going to take care of this and incorporate that into the project and address the problem so that long-term, they don't put 1.8 or almost $2 million into the project and you still have a leaking roof. So we'll take care of it that way.
Questions for the city manager? John?
Your Honor, my observation is as long as the building authority has a reserve to do the roof repair, I'd rather have them do it than wait until the city owns the property and then it comes out of our budget.
Yeah, I'm not sure. We can probably wait, so it's gonna have to start there with the
Yes.
building authority, absolutely. And I think that as it transitions, we'll have to make sure that it's in the order that we would want to accept it in. And I think that's what Mr. Pastu is going toward, to make sure revenues that are available in the current process are expended prior to the city's date of ownership. Correct? Other questions on that? I see none. Mr. Pastu, there's one remaining item.
Attorney Matt Buds, kind of do an introduction with the weed ordinance that you have tonight.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
This is a proposed ordinance that began with discussion from the Committee on the Environment and also discussed with Mr. Leroy and Mr. Lewis. Essentially, if you look at our existing Chapter 712 on weeds, trees, and refuse, there is a list of what was defined as weeds and grass, meaning Canada thistle, milkweed, wild carrots, and oxeye daisies. And there was the thought of, is there a better way to define those things, hit items that might be emerging problem, I'll say weeds or grass, and also make reference to, I'll say, other organizations that have this more within their purview. And so the proposal was discussed, I understand, at the Cody meetings, and the proposed ordinance would be along the lines to make reference to USDA, MDARD, DNR, and Eagle regulatory findings as far as to what a inappropriate weed or grass would be, or other such noxious weeds or grasses as may be determined by city council resolution. So if there was something that those organizations didn't find problematic but that this body did, there'd be the ability to call those noxious weeds as well after a finding by this body. So basically taking what was in essence an older definition of what would have been weeds and grasses subject to our ordinance and bringing in some additional regulatory bodies definitions in terms of what would go into that ordinance.
Comments or questions? Vince, or just looking forward to the next steps of this are?
Well, like many items, we'll do an introduction to city council. If there's no comments or neither need for any further explanation, we'll just move it along to a first reading for an ordinance amendment to amend this chapter of the city code. So be as early as the next meeting if there's no comments or questions tonight.
The only comment I have is I think that having the definition as stated is reasonable. I mean, it's at other levels and other locations in which do that. I know that we weren't able to find out why these were defined individually in the past. I'm not sure why they were listed that way, unless Mr. Buds knows.
Your Honor, if I may, and I don't have the section in front of me, but I believe at some point in time in state law, these were stated as,
Okay.
and so it was a adoption of a state law that went into the ordinance, and since that time, obviously, there's been evolution of what we
Right.
would call noxious weeds, and so I think this is a way to keep it flexible based on those organizations, and also always give city council the ability to make a resolution on those items as well.
Or elsewhere, whether it be in the state or federal, so makes sense. Other comments? All right. We're done with that one. Mr. Pastu, other items?
I don't have anything else tonight unless there's questions for tonight's agenda.
So I'll look to council, see if there's any questions for the administration regarding the council meeting related to agenda items or other items as time permits. Kelly?
Yeah, I'd like to ask the city manager, of course, the ALCC is on the agenda for tonight. Where you added the motion under the council action. So where it says move to select and then blank, so basically you're saying whoever makes the motion will fill in the blank?
Well, it certainly would require an affirmative vote of the remainder of the council, or shouldn't
Of
say the
course,
entire
but-
council, but the intent was, when the packet went out on Thursday, there was no definitive recommendation at that point in time. But clearly, in drafting the motion, fill in the blanks and give me the direction to negotiate a funding and lease agreement with the selected entity.
I guess I'm trying to understand, so this won't be a yes or no,
We got to fill in the blanks and then, you know,
and then take the yes or no
have
vote.
somebody, yep, exactly.
So to fill in the blank, that will require one of the council people to make the
That
motion.
is correct.
Okay, I understand, thank you.
Other questions on the, council agenda that council may have, or other items that may be pending that you wish to speak to? I know there'll be some opportunity at the end of the council meeting for comments from council, as we normally do, that might be appropriate there as well. Seeing nothing further, we'll close the council work session, and at 7:30, the council meeting will begin. Thank you.